to welcome all of you to Yale-China and to really thank you for celebrating Michael Sloan's debut solo exhibit of works, paintings of Hong Kong street markets. And many of you might know Michael's drawings have been published over 100 times in the New York Times op-ed page, as well as in national magazines and newspapers. But his work has been also awarded several silver medals from the Society of Illustrators. And I think this community right here is a representative of friends, family, admirers of Michael's work through the years. But did you also know, many of you probably did know, that he's also a bass guitarist. And Michael plays in the all-illustrator jazz band, the Halftones, and Yale-China's relationship with Michael comes in so many delightful forms. For those of you who attended our inaugural Cheongsam Ball in 2012, the Halftones provided the music for our Shanghai speakeasy environment. And we are also highly indebted to Michael for letting us spend so much of his day with his wonderfully and equally talented better half, or equal half, Leslie Stone. Where's Leslie?
She went to pick up.
Okay?
Oh, she's still there.
She's still there. So many of you know that Yale-China is incredibly fortunate to have within its talented team Leslie Stone, who serves as director of our education program in Yale-China's Hong Kong office, despite the fact that she's currently standing in New England. My name's Nancy Almaswak, who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting some of you, but I'm the executive director of Yale-China, and this has really been a dream to launch an arts initiative that's comprehensive and multifaceted. It was on a rainy day, actually, in September, a few years ago, that Leslie said, in her very standard, modest manner, "Oh, do you want to see one of Michael's Hong Kong drawings?" And the illustration was a Happy Valley trolley featuring Nimbus, and it captured so many of my personal memories of Hong Kong. The smells, the heat, the refreshing, cooling rain on that image. And so Yale-China could not be more delighted to host this exhibit. I must want to just acknowledge also Annie Lin, the Senior Program Officer for the Arts at Yale-China, who worked and collaborated with Michael to curate this exhibit and to put it up. And to be honest, our arts initiative is a new initiative, as I mentioned. We're really trying to bring artists from China to the US, and Annie and I are leaving in 2 weeks for a 2-week expedition to look for collaborators, partners, artists in China, and we're attending the Shanghai Arts Festival to do just that. But really the feature person here in the room is Michael Sloan, so I'd like to have the real joy of inviting him up here to share a little bit about his works and to then answer your questions. It's a little warm here, but we'll open up the windows and we'll try to get some air in, but let's invite Michael up, and congratulations.
Thank you very much, Nancy. I'd like to thank Yale-China, and you beat me to the punch. I also wanted to acknowledge Annie Lin, the Senior Program Officer for Arts. It's been a real collaboration to put on this exhibit. There's also one other person I'd like to acknowledge. That's Michelle Averett, the creative coordinator at Yale-China, who's also worked tirelessly to help make my work look so good. Thank you, Michelle. I really appreciate it. So, my wife and my 3 children and I lived in Hong Kong from July 2012 to July 2013. We lived on the campus of the Chinese University of Hong Kong in the New Territories, which is a completely different experience from the Hong Kong that I had known beforehand on previous short visits of 2 or 3 weeks down by the harbor, which is probably the Hong Kong that most of you are familiar with if you've either visited there or have a vision of Hong Kong in your mind. If the harbor and Hong Kong Island are like Manhattan, this isn't a perfect comparison. The New Territories would be the outer boroughs, so perhaps I could say we lived in the Queens, or the Brooklyn of Hong Kong, and we're exposed to neighborhoods that catered to local communities as opposed to the areas down by the harbor that are much more about catering to business, finance, global consumerism. It gave me perspectives on Hong Kong that I had never had before. I didn't know about New Territories. I'd never really been there at all. I'd never been exposed to street markets in Tai Po Market, for instance, where I spent a lot of time sketching. I was having a conversation a few days ago with a friend, and she asked me, "What do you miss about Hong Kong?" The list is long, very long, and I could mention the park and shop ladies at the grocery store on campus, where I went almost every day to shop for something. I could mention the ladies who work at the coffee corner, the campus canteen, where Leslie and I would have breakfast quite often. Food, other places too. I've noticed though that as time has gone by, we've been back now for 3 months, it's hard to believe, the list gets shorter because I forget things. But I haven't forgotten, and I won't forget, the scenes, people, and places that are shown in these paintings. It was a real ambition of mine before I left to move to Hong Kong, to try to document our experience there in some way so that I wouldn't forget, so that I would have memories as paintings that I could share with you tonight. So thank you for being here. As I said, I've been to Hong Kong several times before, and this is a watercolor sketch that I did on my first visit to Hong Kong in 1998. I thought it would be fun to chart the progress and development of my work over the years. I also hoped that my work would change in unexpected and surprising ways during this year's stay in Hong Kong. And it did. I could never have predicted the changes that would occur. I just assumed that I would still spend a lot of time down by the harbor and that there would be stylistic changes in my work, but I would still paint the same scenes, the shipping, the clouds, the weather, the quality of light. I didn't expect that I would do portraits. I've never done portraits before. I didn't expect that there would be work like the one here on the right that express a personal opinion or a point of view, that have an editorial undercurrent that stems from the sort of work that I've done as an editorial illustrator for over 20 years. I thought I'd touch on that for a moment. What is an editorial illustration? Well, to me, it's illustration, usually accompanying text, that expresses a particular opinion or a point of view. Here's an assignment that I did for the New York Times op-ed letters column. And the art director who I worked for asked me to illustrate the concept that the federal government had inadequately responded to Hurricane Katrina. My response was to draw a somewhat frail-looking Uncle Sam with hairy legs, who seemed more interested in keeping his clothes dry than in actually helping anybody. And the light preserver looks kind of small, not really up to the task. Here's a sketch that I did in the year 2007 on another visit to Hong Kong. At this point, we were traveling with our 3 children, and we were a family on the go. I didn't have the luxury of being able to sit somewhere with my watercolor kit, which is up here in the mantelpiece, by the way, and sketch for an hour and a half, 2 hours at a time. I had to accommodate our life as a family, and I started using a brush pen. I also put the brush pen up on the mantelpiece, which allowed me to stand and to move around and sketch much more quickly. And I think that the quality of lines, the quality of the drawing actually makes the sketch work much more interesting, at least for me, much more appealing. Still sketching scenes down by the harbor, which was the only Hong Kong that I knew at the time. I began getting interested in street markets, not so much for the people that worked there, or for people at all as a focal point, more because I was very attracted to the vintage neon signs and the feeling of activity and bustling crowds, and also the graphic quality of Chinese characters. I don't speak or read Chinese, but it's very important to me that my characters are accurate and look good to those of you who are native Chinese speakers and readers. That required that I do a lot of reference using photographs that I took so that they could go back home and rework pieces to make sure that the characters looked appropriately good. And you can ask my family. I was constantly coming to Leslie and my children who were learning Mandarin as part of their school curriculum last year. The characters look okay. All right. Taking a lot of photographs allowed me to come back to Connecticut and street markets started appearing in some of the work that I did for my comics and graphic novels. This is the Happy Valley trolley piece that Nancy mentioned. Moving forward to June 2012, about a month before we left for our move to Hong Kong, I had a dream one night. And in my dream, I envisioned my sketches in color. I was very excited about that idea, and I wanted to put it into effect, certainly once we got to Hong Kong, and sooner if possible. A short trip to Paris, a week-long trip to Paris, allowed me to try this new technique out, and I was thrilled by it. I was also very excited about the new sketchbooks, which I'm currently using, one of which is up on the mantelpiece here, which allowed me to do panoramic, vertical, and horizontal views, which I've never done before. And I carried the panoramic view and the color work and pretty much immediately into the work that I did once we arrived in Hong Kong. Why was I attracted to street markets? Well, there were a lot of reasons. One of them was that in order to get our apartment and our family life together, we had to go to the Sha Tin Mall, which was about a 10-minute car ride away from our apartment, to do a lot of shopping. We went there almost every week. There are a lot of huge glass and steel malls scattered around Hong Kong, particularly down by the harbor, and the Sha Tin Mall is one of them. It's actually a combination of 3, maybe 4 malls that are interconnected. Multi-level malls with incredible restaurants, incredible stores, everything that you would ever want. I found them to be antiseptic, to be soulless. This was just my experience. To be overwhelming. It took me a good 4 or 5 months for me to get to know my way around. I was constantly getting lost because there were no real landmarks. There was no open sky above me, no sense of the day or the weather. They were very crowded, and the street markets are very crowded too, but at least I was outside. These also were places that catered, as I said, to the local Chinese communities in the new territories, where there were very few signs in English. There seemed to be very few foreigners like me in the street markets. The malls seemed to cater more to a different kind of customer. I started doing a lot of sketching in the MTR, which is Hong Kong's subway, as a way of passing the time. I'd never done many portraits at all. I think this got me into the frame of mind of drawing specific individuals with their unique facial characteristics and expressions that led to the portraits that appear in the paintings in this exhibit. Each one probably took 2 minutes. This is one of my favorite pieces. It's one of the favorite pieces that I did for that entire year in Hong Kong. I'm very delighted by the portrait of that woman. Very quick. This was the first painting that gave me an aha moment. This butcher in Taikoo Market made me think, I want to build off of this painting. I want to do a series about people, business owners in the street markets, actively involved in their work. I had probably passed this particular scene 4 or 5 times until it caught my eye, up to the point where I decided I wanted to do a painting of it. I was lucky, though. That was the luxury of having a year in Hong Kong. I can't emphasize how important a prolonged period of time was for me and for my work. I can get something out of being in a place for 2 or 3 weeks, but I begin developing a certain level of intimacy with a place in a longer period of time. Now that I've been there for a year and that I've seen the work that I've done, a year doesn't seem like long enough. I wish I could go back. I feel like I've just scratched the surface. In this painting, the butcher had a Chinese flag hanging from over his doorway. You see those from time to time in Hong Kong. I saw them on boats in harbor and places like Sai Kung. In general, though, there is a lot of anti-mainland Chinese sentiment in Hong Kong. Many people from Hong Kong feel threatened by the mainland for a variety of reasons. I decided I wanted to do a few paintings about that topic. which led to this painting here, which is about a parallel trader. Parallel traders are citizens of Hong Kong and citizens of mainland China, usually Shenzhen, which is the huge megalopolis right across the border. They shuttle back and forth across the border after buying products in Hong Kong that either aren't available in the mainland or whose quality can't be trusted. For instance, infant milk powder. They bring them back to the mainland and they either sell them for profit or they use them for their own personal use for their families. Parallel traders caused a lot of consternation, particularly in the subways. Hong Kong is an extremely polite, courteous place. It's an extremely safe place. We gave our children a certain kind of independence that they'd never had before. Our 13-year-old especially really appreciated it. Having to negotiate around a person with a huge bags, either on a crowded escalator heading down to the train or in the train itself, troubled a lot of people in Hong Kong. I think their activities also troubled people too. They would buy up entire stocks of infant milk powder to the point where, at least in the towns along the border, they weren't available for the local Hong Kong population. That was quite upsetting to them. While we were there, this was a news item for several months, and a law was passed, or several laws were passed, regulations that prohibited large packages from being brought onto the MTR, and I think that you could only buy 2 or 3 large tins of milk powder at a time. That was meant to curtail their activities. I knew that there was a lot of prejudice and ill will directed at parallel traders. I didn't feel it myself. I wanted to show a parallel trader in a dignified way. This may not have been his choice of profession, but he was probably just trying to get through life and support his family the best way he could. I empathized with him. I wanted to show that in this painting. Likewise, there was a lot of prejudice and ill will towards Chinese mainland shoppers who come to Hong Kong. A lot of it was because of differences in cultural behaviors. As I said, Hong Kong is an extremely polite place. It's a very rule-abiding and rule-conscious place. The normal behavior that exists in the mainland isn't like the behavior that exists in Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, you don't litter, you don't loiter, you don't spit in public, you don't eat in areas like on the subway trains where it's not allowed. All of these behaviors were considered infractions of the way of life in Hong Kong in some way. This was actually 2 different scenes which I composed into one. I saw this group of mainland Chinese shoppers, and other groups like them, many times in the Sha Tin Mall. And this advertisement for luxury goods items was several yards away, and I combined them because I wanted to show that the shoppers were being laughed at, which is what I felt was happening. As I end this talk, I thought a good way to think about what lies ahead for me is what might come next on future trips to Hong Kong. We'll be going next summer for 2 months. Maybe a series of paintings about the products that are actually sold in the street markets. Dried seafood, dried fish. I can imagine this painting being quite large, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 feet wide. I think I would enjoy doing that. But mostly I want to get back to doing paintings like this one of a man who was a tool repair shop owner. And his work, I particularly like this scene because of the exaggerated red color that was produced by the neon signs in the shop. You'll notice that I did these paintings from the perspective of the sidewalk. The shops don't have windows and doors the way shops do here. Instead, they're completely exposed and open to the street, so you can engage and see what the small business owners are doing. It's wonderful for me. I would like to continue doing the series when we go back to Hong Kong next time. Thank you very much, and I would love to take any questions that you have. I've found that as much as I like talking about my work and sharing it with people, I like answering questions even more, especially from children.
Michael, how far offshore is the island, and how do you get back and forth? Some of it's implied by your pictures, but I'm curious.
The Star Ferry takes about 10 minutes or less to go back and forth from Kowloon to Hong Kong Island. Now there are subway lines and various, I think there are 3 tunnels for automobile and bus traffic as well.
How did the residents react to you standing there doing sketch?
Does somebody have my sketchbook up here? This man didn't like it. He was quite upset, and he ducked inside the shop. Generally, I tried to be as invisible as possible. There were certain scenes that required that I take photographs and work from those photographs when I got back home because they were so fleeting, like this scene which I saw in Shanghai. I was able to do that quite unobtrusively. Generally, I never had a problem. Nobody ever confronted me about that. Yes, Paige?
I mean, I had a similar question. A picture like that, for example, did that person know that you were sketching him? Did you ever go back and show him your product at some point, or what was the process?
I use 3 different tools for these sketches. I sketch on location, I take photographs, and I also use my imagination. In this case, I believe I did a quick sketch just to work out a composition in pencil. I took a lot of photographs. Whenever there were any Chinese characters involved, I needed to take a lot of photographs so that I could make sure that they were accurate. I don't think he even noticed.
Did you make a point, because I was reading about you online last night, of going to a place where there wasn't anybody else who was non-Chinese before you decided to take the scene? Because I thought that was very courageous of you.
Not deliberately. It was only after going to these places several times that I realized that there were many Caucasian
white, red-headed guy, you're like...
But I never felt threatened. I mean, originally, the reason why I returned to technical market after being introduced to it by a friend and former Yale-China fellow, Min Tran, was that I wanted to get a vest to wear, like a hunting vest that could accommodate all the paraphernalia that I needed when I would go out and explore and sketch. And I had a lot of things: sketchbooks, phone, pens, maps. I ended up getting a vest that my family thought looked absolutely revolting. I was actually contemplating bringing it tonight and wearing it so that you could see it. It was the first time I actually had a negotiation with a store owner.
So you had to make it for you?
No, they sold them there. They were very, very cheap. It cost the equivalent of probably $5 or $6 US. I went to one store and they didn't have the right size. I went to another store, they wanted the equivalent of $12 US. I said, I'll pay you $6. We negotiated some figures. They didn't speak English. And it was fine. I never felt, as I said, threatened in any way. These neighborhoods felt perfectly safe. I'll tell you, I'm a huge fan of the French filmmaker, director, writer Jacques Tati. If any of you who have children have not seen these films, may I recommend Mon Oncle and Mr. Hulot's Holiday. It comes from the tradition of Charlie Chaplin, but it's something else. When I would walk through these street markets, very often I would walk with Jacques Tati in my mind, and I would think to myself, well, if Jacques Tati was walking, what would he see? How would he approach the scene? I just love his aesthetic, his point of view. A lot of his films deal with the conflict between the old and the new, and so much of Hong Kong is about that for me. I think putting myself in the mindset of Jacques Tati made visiting the street markets even more exciting than they otherwise might have been. Yes?
I have a question, but first I just want to comment that in journalism, whether it's through your paintbrush or through your writing, is really powerful. The one here, the gentleman writing with just water that disappears, and then your writing of it, talking about Dubai is very moving. poem is really powerful. But often, I think just your paintbrush also expresses your journalism, your thoughts. Really powerful.
And probably from my experiences as an editorial illustrator over the years, but thank you for mentioning this important connection.
You have the perspective of being there, but one who is really looking to the people and to the scenes. What kind of changes have you seen in Hong Kong from where you first went to now?
My experience, as I said, when I first went to Hong Kong was exclusively around the harbor. When I went there for the first time in 1998, there was more of an obvious British influence. There were more signs in English. There were really not many, if any, mainland Chinese visitors that I was aware of. That's all changed. I can't speak of the changes that have occurred in the new territories because I haven't been there before, but I've heard that the new territories, the towns in the new territories like Shanghai have become much more developed. And there is increasing development that may eventually encroach on some of the local traditional street markets like the one shown in my paintings. I hope that doesn't happen. I can't pretend that doing these paintings will promote an awareness, a larger awareness among Hong Kong residents of this wonderful asset that exists there. But I hope that it will at least make some people who go to Hong Kong and perhaps haven't visited these street markets appreciate how wonderful they are. I feel like I should say more, but I'm not a social scientist or a historian or an anthropologist. But I am aware of those kinds of questions. They did play into my work in some way. Jay?
Were you able to do the color while you were standing up, or did you have to go somewhere else to color in what you drawn on the spot?
In general, I would do a black and white sketch, and I would take that back to our apartment, and I would add the color there. I'm trying to think if there are any of the original paintings. I don't know if you've noticed, but the sketchbook that's being passed around has the first drafts of nearly all the pieces that are here on the wall. When I would do a sketch that I liked, I would enlarge it because if I ever hoped to have an exhibit, and that wasn't something that was planned until I returned in July. The sketchbook wouldn't work. I have a rule that I never tear anything out of the sketchbook. And I could exhibit the sketchbook, which I'm doing today, but I wanted something that would eventually command a presence on the wall in a better way. So I repainted, redrew all of the work for this show, but while I was in Hong Kong. Occasionally I would add color to a scene that I was painting on location, but more and more I started just doing the black and white work, taking photographs and adding color later. Paul?
So this began as a journey of exploration for you in discovering Hong Kong and the people and making portraits. And what did it discover about yourself as a result of that, and maybe where you want to go in the future with your art?
I discovered, if I didn't already know it, that I'm a flaneur, which is a French term meaning somebody who wanders or saunters around and explores aimlessly, though. I would say that I'm a flaneur with a purpose. I discovered that I didn't know Hong Kong at all, and even after being there for a year and doing this work, I feel like I've just scratched the surface. There's so much more to discover. I discovered that I like to paint portraits. I never realized that. In general, I had avoided drawing or painting people because it wasn't something that I was that comfortable with or interested in. That's not the case now. I discovered that even through all the challenges that my family faced while we were there, minor challenges like coping with dealing with the new environment, becoming comfortable with new schools. I have a wonderful family and we became much closer. I think while we were there, and we have memories that we'll carry with us for the rest of our lives. Ava?
While you were painting or drawing, like out on the street, did anybody stop by you and like watch over your shoulder? Because I know that I draw a lot, and so I'll go out, and sometimes people will stop and look over my shoulder and see what I'm doing.
That happens all the time. It doesn't bother me that much. Occasionally people will try to engage me in conversation. That becomes difficult because when I'm drawing or painting, I don't know how you feel, but it takes a lot of concentration and focus. And having a conversation I find is quite distracting. That didn't happen that much in Hong Kong. When I've sketched and painted outdoors in the mainland, it really draws the crowd, partially because they're not used to seeing somebody do that outside, let alone somebody who has white skin and red hair. It depends where we would be. If we were in the country, we would draw a greater crowd. In the city, less so. But yes, that happened quite often.
So I get a sense in looking at a lot of your portraits and other compositions here that there's a quiet meditative solitude in a lot of the pieces, and I just wanted to know how much of that is from your perspective working with these people and also trying to, as you put it, you wanted to represent with you with dignity, and also in what other aspects of these paintings here do you find yourself?
Okay, the first part of that question is easier to answer than the second. I wanted to focus on the small business owners, and very often when I would choose a scene to paint, they would be the only ones present in their store, or if there were other people, they would be tucked around in the background and I could edit them out. I thought that having the focus on one individual would make the piece stronger, so it was a composition decision. What did I discover about myself? Let me think about that. I'll take another question, and I'll see if I can come back to it and respond to it in a coherent way. The difficulties that I have in talking about my work, a lot of the decisions that I made were intuitive. And trying to intelligently and articulately speak about them is quite challenging. I think any artist would know that. So let me see if I can come back to you. This one, the original sketch probably took about 2 hours. I work quickly because when I work as an editorial illustrator, I have to do my drawings generally in very quick deadlines, so I'm used to working very fast. Some of the more involved sketches, I think the one that took the longest time might be the one on the wall there in the bottom right of the fisherwoman in Sai-Kung butchering some fish in her boat. Because there's more detail. That original sketch might have taken 5 to 6 hours, and then the larger version might have taken about 8 or 10.
When you go back the next time, do you think you will continue along the same line, or have you thought of moving the paintings to a different line?
I always like having my work develop and change. So if that happens, that would be wonderful. I'm also aware that going back for 2 months isn't very long. 3 weeks will pass before we're settled and get over jet lag. And suddenly we'll have 3, 4, 5 weeks there for me to go out and paint. I may not be able to do as much sketching or as painting as I would like. I don't know. Maybe in order to do as much as I would like, I'll have to change my subject matter. I would love to do more work like this.
Would you work in the mainland more?
That's one thing that I didn't get a chance to do. I would love to explore the border area in Shenzhen. I went to Shenzhen just a few times to deal with visa issues and on the way to the high-speed train to Changsha with my family. The Hong Kong side of the border isn't all that exciting. It's like an airport terminal. But the Shenzhen side is this huge commercial hub with a lot of activity and people coming up to me saying, you want a massage? Or you want a taxi? You want a ride? It's very chaotic. The border areas attract a certain kind of person. It's very edgy. I would love to be able to go back to Shenzhen and sketch the border areas sometime. I still haven't been able to think of an answer to your question. I don't know if I does anybody else have any other questions? Mike?
I was wondering if you thought that not speaking a language actually helped or hurt in the whole process. Because not speaking it might give you a certain, I mean, you can just focus in on the actual visual stuff. I was just curious how you felt about that.
In terms of the artwork on the walls, it didn't help or hurt. I don't think it was really that relevant. It just meant that I had to spend more time making sure that the Chinese characters were accurate. In terms of getting by in life, it would have been much more pleasant if I had spoken more Cantonese. I found that even when I said, Josan, good morning, or Leiho, greeting, hello, the person who I was speaking to would smile and respond in a very warm way, in a way that they wouldn't if I said hello in English. I think it was an attempt, feeble, but nonetheless an attempt on my part to connect with them and to say, this is your city, this is your language. I don't know it, but I'm going to try to to extend myself to you as best I can in those terms. What did I learn about myself? I learned that being open to an element of chance and serendipity is very important to my work. I think I already knew that, but never as much as I did with this work here. As I said, I could never have anticipated that I would do portraits, work like this before. And I'm grateful that I was open enough and willing enough to try to do something new when the stimulation and the inspiration came my way.
Do you feel that that was represented in the actual products that are on the walls now, or more in the conceptualization process for putting those things together?
Both. Both, but without the conceptualization process.
Right, so you don't have it on the wall.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
Great. So thank you so much, Michael. It's been such a pleasure to work with you. And in so many ways, Michael just epitomizes, I think, what Yale-China really values. I'm reminded of when the first Yale graduates went out with their medical briefcase to Changsha, Hunan. And Michael, instead of medical briefcase, is taking a sketchbook and paints. And your fresh perspective, really. So Yale-China has compiled your exhibit here at Yale-China, and this is actually Michael's guest book, so please sign it on your way out. It'll be located in the Yale-China History Room in the back, and Michael will present, we'll have people sign this throughout the year and give it back to you at the end of the year. It's been such a pleasure to work with you, so thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you so much.
Sharing some of Michael's work with people abroad or across the country, we are selling greeting cards. Please check with Magdalene at the front. Thank you so much for coming.
And also, the work is for sale. And the proceeds support the artists and the Yale-China and all its program work in education and health, and particularly in the arts. So you can, if anyone's interested, you can go to the front of the room.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.